Hi, friends. How are you guys today? Are you so excited that we're rolling right around to the end of this AP Lang test and all that stuff? I'm so excited to be here with you guys today. We're going to do exactly what you all asked for. We're going to look over the Banneker prompt. And of course, you guys had some vocab to get you started. Give me a little symbol, some kind of icon over there in the chat. How are you feeling tonight? Are you good? Healthy? Happy? What do you got? Comment over there on the little side. You guys are nailing these rhetorically accurate verbs on these flashcards. Hi, friends. Hey there. All right. Yay. Okay, guys, I'm so excited. We're going to go ahead and get started so that we can look at it today. On Monday, I asked, what do you all want? And so what we've done is we've really kind of made sure that we're trying to reach out to you all, answering all of your questions and bringing in all of those pieces. So with that, I bring you CRAM number 9. The Banneker responses. So what we're going to do is actually take a little bit of a different approach tonight, but I think you'll be okay with that. I do want to just kind of remind you of our weekly stream calendar. I know you guys are all with us on these CRAMs lately, so this weekly stream calendar is a little bit out for you, but just so you know, we are here for you. I'm sure you guys are following us at Think Fiveable and seeing our tweets that we've had kind of coming out since the AP exams have started, but we're going to do the same thing this week that we've done the last few weeks. Do you remember what that was? My number one thing when you guys get started and you have that moment of panic, what are you going to do? Say it with me. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Focus on what you can do, right? That one's also acceptable there, Andrew. Andrew says he's going to pray. You can pray too. That's cool. Okay, so you're going to focus on what you can do. So instead of looking at your paper and thinking about all the things you can't do, you're going to go right to what you can do, okay? You're going to go to that rhetorical pricing with your introduction paragraph. You're going to make sure that you have a defensible response to the prompt. That's your thesis statement. You're going to think about the classical argumentative structure. You're going to think about Toulmin's model for argumentation. Then you're going to think about how you can use those two elements not only to understand the prompt they give you, but to build a high quality response of your own. Then you're going to look at those modes of development and build the body paragraphs so that you can increase the quality of your reasoning. Now, we've had this up here for a little bit, but I am going to make a little teeny tiny sidebar. Someone said, what if I don't write about the modes of development? That's okay. You pick what you write about, right? Absolutely you do. And then from there, of course, that strong conclusion paragraph for the rhetorical analysis. So what are we going to do tonight? A wee bit different, okay? We're going to go through those overall steps just like we have been because I want them to be in your brain, okay? And with that, we're going to do a quick review of the Banneker text. And then with the student samples, we're going to do it a little bit differently, okay? We're going to look at some thesis statements and we're going to talk about the line of reasoning and the sophistication. And instead of focusing on one essay this time, a lot of you guys recognized analogy being used in this prompt, right? So a lot of you wrote paragraphs about the analogy that was being used. And a lot of you guys are still like, I don't know, I just want to get the 4 on commentary and analysis, and I really want to get sophistication. And so we've kind of talked about what that looks like, and I showed you guys some examples of it. But what we're going to do for tonight is we're actually going to look at 3 paragraphs. All of them are going to be about analogy, but hopefully tonight you're going to see the difference in the writing style that pushes that commentary and analysis up and that pushes that sophistication up, okay? So hopefully that'll help. And then, of course, we're going to talk about what's next. And CRAM number 10 is what? It's a major CRAM session, right? Of course it is. So what is our learning intention for tonight? Our goal is to put all of these pieces together to write a strong response in the given time frame, which is how many minutes? 45 minutes, okay? So in looking at, absolutely, 45 minutes. So in looking at that, you're going to be able to read and analyze the text, looking at the author's primary claim and the purpose of the overall passage. You're going to chunk it, and then you're going to go based on the strategies that you see in each chunk. And then you're going to write your thorough rhetorical analysis in a high-pressure, timed environment. So it's going to be amazing, right? Okay. just to make sure we're all on the same page before we look at these writing samples, we're going to start with analysis of the prompt. Now, remember, you do want to spend about 3 minutes on this, okay? You're looking at the background, the advice, and the task. 2 parts. Concrete, that's the part they tell you to do, and the abstract, that's the thing you got to think about. Did you guys notice anything different with this prompt? Anybody? See anything over there in the chat? Okay. Very historical, absolutely. And sometimes when you have one that's so historical, it's kind of a challenge because you want to show that you have some background knowledge, but you don't want to go like completely off track. And sometimes that happened. Let's look at this one together, okay? Benjamin Banneker, the son of former slaves, was a farmer, astronomer, mathematician, surveyor, and author. So in your brain, you went son of former slave, yet he does all these things. Okay, he's educated, okay? So probably whoever this letter is to is going to think of him as educated, which is a little bit, tiny bit higher status of uneducated son of slaves, okay? Big difference. In 1791, in your brain, you're going, old dead guy. He wrote to Thomas Jefferson, and in your brain, you're like, oh, my boy TJ, but don't write that in your essay, okay? That would be bad. Framer of the Declaration of Independence and Secretary of State to President George Washington. Read the following excerpt from the letter and write an essay that analyzes how Banneker uses rhetorical strategies to argue against slavery. That prompt told you his purpose, didn't it? It said, hey, he's against slavery. Now you got to figure out what he does to do it, right? So it's a little bit different from some of the abstract tasks that we've been looking at. So I don't know if it's going to tell you the purpose or not. If it does, I think it's a little bit more approachable, maybe. But I did see that some of you guys, when you were writing this, had a teeny tiny misread of the prompt, okay? And this is how important details are. Are you ready? Do you want to know what the misread was? You see where it says Framer of the Declaration of Independence and Secretary of State to President George Washington? Who was the letter written to? Can you tell me in the chat? Who was the letter written to? Do you remember? Absolutely. It was Thomas Jefferson. So you can't write your prompt about Benjamin Banneker's letter to George Washington and Thomas Jefferson because then you've misread the whole thing. Tiny details matter, right? They absolutely do. Okay, so quick question for you then is, when you kind of think about the big picture of the article, right? What does Banneker do? They told us he's arguing against slavery, but what does he do in arguing against slavery? Think about that for just a minute and tell me what you think. That's a good one. Okay, keep going. It kind of addresses the antithesis of Jefferson's ideals because in your brain, you're like, okay, Declaration of Independence, peace out. We don't need to be part of Britain anymore. He kind of calls Jefferson a hypocrite. Absolutely. He says Jefferson is a bad Christian and he's going to make his God mad. He definitely does bring some religion in there. He compares the experiences to what Jefferson faced in the Revolutionary War and the double standard of freedom. Absolutely. The juxtaposition of opposing ideas. Okay, absolutely. He does all of these things, right? And he actually does a lot more as he progresses through this very short excerpt of a longer letter, obviously. So let's kind of think about how we could put this together to write an essay. Okay, so keep thinking, but think with me. Your step 2 is to read, annotate, and chunk the text, and you should have about 8 minutes to do that. This prompt was pretty short. So did you find 8 minutes to be manageable here? Probably so, right? Because you want to go through and really look at it and then think about it. And with this one, because it's so short, you actually have the opportunity to go back and do a second read, don't you? And I love the opportunity to do a second read because sometimes like when you're reading it a second time, it's like watching your favorite movie more than once. Every time you watch it, you learn something new, right? So if your prompt is this short, don't forget you have that perfect opportunity to go through and look at it a second time. So with that said, we know what he's arguing because the prompt told us point blank, argue against slavery. Check mark. But the question then becomes, how does he do it? And how does it work? So we've got to think through this prompt and we've got to look for the message. We know the purpose overall, but do we know the purpose of each individual chunk? We've got to think about his audience. Now, this is a letter to a singular person, right? So we've got to think about how Thomas Jefferson, the reader of the letter, would react to what Benjamin Banneker has done. We want to look for strategies. We want to look for devices and tools. We want to think about those modes of development. And of course, the connections that we can make to the text, because that's going to help us to demonstrate understanding of that rhetorical situation as well. So to kind of make sure that we're all in this together, let's look over these paragraphs and just kind of make sure we understand what's going on. So first thing that I'm going to ask is, give me a thumbs up if in your brain you were like, whoa, he repeats sir a lot. Did you notice that repetition of sir? Yeah, you did, didn't you? You know what? So did everybody else. What's it saying? Everybody and their brother recognized the repetition there. So if I write about repetition and that's a strategy that everybody and their brother recognized, am I going to stand out or am I going to blend in? What do you think? You're going to blend in, right? And when your reader is reading tons of essays, do you want to be one that just blends in or do you want to be one that like stands out a little bit? Absolutely. So I would challenge you to write about the ones that maybe are not necessarily the most obvious because everybody recognized that one. Okay. All right. So first major paragraph, he's like, sir, suffer me to recall to your mind that time when you were a slave. Do you remember? Are you with it? He was drawing a parallel between tyranny and slavery and this state of servitude. Whew, that sounds like a snake, doesn't it? State of servitude. Did you pick up on alliteration? Alliteration's a beautiful thing. And then he's trying to draw these feelings. You got that right. He's appealing to the feelings that were going on during that revolutionary time period, right? When we have this Revolutionary War. And he even brings it out and says, someone mentioned earlier about that connection to religion. He specifically says, you cannot but acknowledge that the present freedom and tranquility which you enjoy, you have mercifully received, and that is the peculiar blessing of heaven. You caught that, didn't you? All right, so moving on down into that next paragraph, this is when he says, you absolutely know what slavery was like there, and you didn't like it. In fact, if I'm wrong, and Benjamin Banneker knows he's not wrong, he says, remember, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not only is Benjamin Banneker educated, he is now using TJ's words against him, right? Whoops. That can be a powerful rhetorical tool, can't it? All, right? But all means all. Moving right on down, he says, this was when your tender feelings, you declared the proper ideas of liberty and free possession of those blessings to which you were entitled by nature. And then he says, but how pitiable is it? Pitiable. It's kind of like a big ouchie here. He says this is a double standard. He says that you should at the same time counteract his mercies in detaining by fraud and violence so numerous a part of my brethren. Note the chunk there, my brethren. Now, Thomas Jefferson's going to be like, oh, you're right. He's going to have a new effect there by bringing it into him, okay? So then you can kind of drop down. And of course, that last one, he says, you know what? You have too much personal experience with this. I don't need to bore you with telling you how bad slavery is because you already know. And he also says, but you know what else you don't need me to do? You don't need me to tell you what to do about this. You already know. You're a religious man. You know how to fix this. I don't have to tell you what to do. That's like great, right? That whole aspect there. Right. He's like totally he's trying to give him a little bit of respect, but at the same time, he's like calling him out. So you can kind of see that would have a bit of an impact on him, right? I think so. All right. So your next step would be to create a quick outline. And you got two things you're working with. Number one, you got that classical argumentative structure. And number two, within your paragraphs themselves, you have that Toolman outline. Okay. So you want to think about those things as well. So when we get ready to move right along, remember I mentioned a second read? Here you have a second read with a full focus on the outline. Okay. So you can definitely look here and you can see B1. That's going to be the body paragraph, right? A, you can kind of see that the first piece of evidence here with A, it's going to talk about the tyranny of the British crown to reduce you to a state of servitude. It's going to talk about the present freedom and tranquility was the blessing of heaven. These are the phrases that are going to go with it. Underneath body 1, you've got an evidence B down here at the bottom where it says it refers to TJ's words in the Declaration of Independence. Dropping down just a little bit, you can see body paragraph 2. It's talking about the proper ideas of the great valuation of liberty. And then note that nature is circled there. So obviously there's going to be some focus on nature, just kind of a reminder. You've got your A addressing this idea of, oops, this is what you were saying, but this is what you were doing. And those things don't really align. And then you've got B. He says, when you were groaning captivity and cruel oppression, you're at the same time found guilty of that criminal act. Dropping it down to body paragraph 3. You've got your knowledge is too extensive to need me to recite it here. And then you've got B, evidence B would be that put your souls in their souls. And then you don't need the direction of myself or others. You know what manner to proceed. So you can see there the appeal to biblical morality. Okay. So kind of all together there. Now, I did see a comment pop up as we were kind of looking through this about the use of sir, because is it important? I think it's intentional, obviously, that Banneker is saying, this sir. Suffer me, like, sir, suffer me, right? So I think there's definitely an intentionality in the tone there. And the question is, can you say that this is a mocking tone? I think that you could make an argument that it is a mocking tone, but I'm not sure that that's what Banneker was intending at that point. And the reason is, if you have a letter that someone has written you and they're just ridiculing you the whole way through it, are you going to read the whole thing? Probably not, right? You're going to wad it up and throw it at them or burn it or tear it or whatever it is that you're going to do. And so I do think that he's trying to kind of build in a little bit of respect at the same time as almost humbling him and kind of bringing him down, scaling it back a little bit. So you can kind of look at it from that way. Okay. Are you with me? And now for something totally different. A lot of you guys still had some questions over strategies and devices. So I thought, how in the world can we do something kind of different and look at strategies and devices? So we're going to play a game. On the next screen, you're going to see some statements. I'd like for you to circle the strategies and then draw lines to the devices that you would lump in that strategy. Okay. Now, in the event that I don't give you enough time for that, because remember, you got to get used to high pressure timed activities. If you don't feel like you got enough time for that, circle the strategies and maybe put a slash over the devices. This is intended for you guys to start looking at and figuring out which ones are which. Are you ready? Here you go. Play the Jeopardy music in my head. So you're looking at strategy or device. You're going to circle the strategies because remember, those are the things that are going to boost your writing way up. So circle the strategies. All right, you about ready? One more minute, one more minute. A little more challenging than you thought. Okay. All right, are you ready to see what we have here? Well, let's check it out. Here we are. You guys were pretty good at this. Now, what I want you to notice here is that you do see the strategy kind of has the circle, and then the device that you could use to go with the strategy has the box of the same color. Now, humbling himself as one of his brethren actually is written as a strategy because it's written as the action there. However, in this case, it kind of would be used to go with the parallel between tyranny and slavery, and that's why it's marked that way. So, strategy, yes, it's written as a verb, and the strategies are, in fact, the verbs. But it would go with that drawing a parallel. You can also see, because we've used this same pattern with our colors the whole time here, the first body paragraph is going to be drawing a parallel between tyranny and slavery, talking about humbling himself as one of his brethren. A little further down, that analogy that newly freed Americans should understand the blight of the slaves. And then that body paragraph 2, it's going to be about making intentional syntactical choices, using careful diction, and the repetition of sir. Now, I am going to stand on my soapbox here. I want you to look into my eyes. Are you ready to? Don't say the author uses diction. Don't say the author uses diction because everyone uses diction. Everyone does. Even you do it when you decide not to use dirty words in front of your grandmother and you use them in front of your friends. That's word choice, right? So you're literally just saying the author uses word choice. Everyone uses word choice. That's not special, okay? The other thing I want to highlight here is that making intentional syntactical choices, that basically is the author uses syntax, okay? But it's better than just saying the author uses syntax because you know what? Everybody uses syntax too. It's not about the fact that you have syntax. It's about how you use that syntax intelligently. Okay, so syntax is the way that the words and the paragraphs are arranged on the page. That's like your short sentence, your simple sentence, your complex sentences, bringing in multiple pieces. Okay, so it's looking at parallel structure within those sentences or in a series of sentences. It is the anaphora that happens as it goes throughout it. It's the use of specific rhetorical questions, or it's the use of cumulative sentences that kind of build it up together. So all of those are syntactical choices. Everybody uses syntax. Syntax happens naturally because you're writing things out, okay? So you want to keep that in mind. Now, I did see another question that popped up that said, is it a coincidence that the strategies all start with a verb? No coincidence at all. That's exactly what it is. Strategies are the things that are being done. Strategies are the actions. It's the verb. The device is the tool that's being used. So it is intentional. The strategy is a verb. So your question then becomes when you're building your essay, if I'm talking about how Banneker is drawing a parallel between tyranny and slavery, the question is, what does he use to do that? Well, he uses the analogy. Okay? And then that next question, just because, you know, we're all about AP and trying to get that 5, the next question is, how does it influence the audience? So if strategy, Banneker is drawing a parallel between tyranny and slavery by using the device of an analogy that newly freed Americans should understand the blight of the slaves. How does he use it? Well, he's using it because he wants Thomas Jefferson to have this personal reaction and to connect his personal feelings of that oppression during that time period with the oppression the slaves feel now. Why does he want him to do that? Well, because Thomas Jefferson thought it was kind of terrible the way that it was. So maybe, just maybe, Thomas Jefferson will think, you know what? That was really terrible. I don't want to do that to other people. I'm going to help stop slavery. And that's kind of what you're looking at with your rhetorical analysis. Okay? Yeah, that's right. So toolbox, right? These kind of, someone asked over the last couple of days, how does this work? You talk about the toolbox, but I don't know, like, which ones am I supposed to write about? The idea is it's sort of a progression. It kind of goes down. First thing is you start with a classical structure because you know that you're going to have an introduction with a background. You know you've got to have a position and some evidence, and you know you got to have a conclusion and maybe a call to action depending on the appropriateness, right? So you know that if you break the chunks down, you're going to find the strategy in the chunk. You know that in those strategies, you're going to find something that's being used. You're going to find the device. You're going to find the tool. Then you're going to use the Toolman model to build a paragraph that explains how the device achieves the goal of the strategy and how the strategy achieves the purpose of the chunk. Okay? Modes of development is sort of like a bonus point down there. You have a way of writing, and Banneker and anyone has a way of writing. And sometimes we do use those modes of development. Sometimes we say, hey, these are all the problems and these are the solutions. Sometimes we say these are the causes, these are the effects. And sometimes we classify and we give analogy and we give anecdotes. All of those things are your modes of development. With me? Super excited? Okay. Well, in that case, you know that step 4 is to write your introduction and your thesis statement, and that should take about 5 minutes. So we're doing a pretty decent job with the bulk of the introduction, but the thesis statement, I wanted to just have a wee bit more focus on it. Do you have time with me? Can we do this? I think we can. We're going to play another game. Are you ready? Okay, the question is, does it get the point? Okay, so what I'd like for you to do is put a check if it gets the point, and then I want you to circle the thesis statement that you think is the strongest example, okay? So you're going to put a check mark if it gets the point, and you're going to circle the one that is the strongest. Okay, go. It would be helpful if it was the writing one, right? Okay, what do you see? Which one gets the thesis point, or ones, could be plural, and then circle the one that's the best. Okay, let's take about 1 more minute. Check mark if it gets the thesis point. Circle the one you think is the strongest. All right, are you ready? Okay, here we go. We're going to look at this here. So we have a few on here that definitely would get the thesis point. Now, remember, the thesis point's relatively easy. It just has to be a defensible response to the prompt that outlines the rhetorical choices made by the writer. Okay, but let's talk about each of these, okay? So the first one we have here is the experience against Britain's tyrannical rule. Okay, so it's comparing Jefferson's experience. And then we have beliefs on freedom. Okay, whose beliefs on freedom? Are we comparing the beliefs on freedom? Does comparing go with this piece as well? And then looking at that next one, the divine purpose of his actions to the institution of slavery. The question becomes, are these three things different enough that you can identify three separate strategies that go with them? Is this a combination of the strategy and the device? Notice the way it sounds a little bit awkward there. Did you catch that awkwardness? So does it get the thesis point? Yes. But is it the strongest example on the page? Not on this page. Now let's look at the next one down here. Banneker's letter to Washington effectively argues against slavery by using repetition, analogy, and irony. Is that one going to get the thesis point? Yes, it is. It outlines body paragraph 1 as repetition, body paragraph 2 is analogy, and body paragraph 3 is going to be about irony. Those are devices. Is that going to be a higher level writing style or not as much? So it technically does address those three things, but did you catch what we just caught, what Sierra just caught? This is an example of a misread, right? It's not a letter to Washington. So it might have those 3 points, but does it respond to the prompt? It's not going to have all of those details, right? Because it's missing. It's a misread, okay? Now, a big problem with something like this is if the continuation in the rest of the essay is about Washington, then it's going to hurt you in a lot of areas, right? However, if it's one time where you do it and then the rest of the times you've corrected it and it was like some kind of weird glitch in your brain when you did it there, you might be able to get a little bit of leeway because the readers are kind of looking for ways to help you out. So just kind of think about that. Looking at this third one down here, by calling Jefferson to self-reflect, emphasizing his hypocrisy and calling him to action, Banneker argues that slavery is a direct opposition to the morals that America was founded upon. You have your 3 clear strategies: calling Jefferson to self-reflect, emphasizing hypocrisy, calling him to action. Those are your 3 things. It gives us all of it. Yes, that does get the thesis point, and that happens to be the strongest example on the page. So good job. Okay, now let's look at the next one. So in a letter to Thomas Jefferson, he employs servile diction, phrases that express flattery, and circumlocution. Now I want you to look that word up. Do you know what that is? Do you know what that device is? Can you tell me, anybody over there on the side? I'm just curious. Look that up for me. There's a method to my madness, I promise. Did you figure it out? So all 3 of these things are kind of the same, aren't they? They're all kind of the same. Employs servile diction. Okay, he employs a servile word choice. He uses phrases that express flattery. Well, it's the word choice that allows those phrases to express flattery. And then, of course, using many words where fewer words will do. Well, that's also word choice. So what we have are 3 separate things here, but in all, they're just one, right? So if I write this essay and these are my body paragraphs, what I'm going to end up with is I'm actually going to end up with circular reasoning. I'm going to be saying the same thing over and over again and not really achieving any goal or any purpose. Okay. Now, the last one I think is a result of just a typo. If you look at it, it is kind of longer. Note the wording: driven by the deplorable inhumanity and injustice of slavery in a country founded on principles of freedom, Benjamin Banneker pens a letter to the author of the Declaration and the Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, Jefferson's revolutionary spirit and desire for equality among all men. So you're kind of in a place where you're like, oh, what happened there? I'm not really sure kind of what was going on, you know? So you got that little, a little bit of confusion in it, because we don't really know what it is. And I really do. I think that's an example of maybe where your brain was going faster than your fingers could type, and it was on the right track, but you don't really know exactly where it went. Okay? So, good deal there. All right. I see what you just posted, and yes, it's actually the one that's opened on my computer for next, so you'll get it tonight, actually. Okay. So, do you feel a little bit better about thesis statements? Okay, so that said, what we're going to do now is something a little bit more different, right? Because got to keep it exciting. So the last three different ones that we've gone through, the last three different CRAMs, we have looked at a sample of a student's writing, and we've talked about the strengths, what's great about these paragraphs. And so that can be very helpful, but sometimes when we only see a specific quality, we kind of get stuck there, right? Like we don't understand, how do I get from where I am to where this is? How do I get to that 4, or how do I get that 1 for sophistication? So since a lot of people recognized analogy, I had some wonderful volunteers who said, you know what? Go ahead, you can use my paragraph. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is say thank you so much for being willing to take the risk and let us use you guys' paragraphs, because the best way that we can learn is through talking about them, right? Actual student samples. So before we look at them, I want to remind you of a few key ideas, okay? The first thing is the rhetorical analysis rubric for 2020, so that's 4 now, is your evidence must be specific, okay? Specific evidence that supports all of the claims in the line of reasoning, okay? And then the commentary, the difference between a 3 and a 4 is whether it explains some of that evidence, some of that specific evidence, or consistent evidence, okay? So when you're looking at it, when you move to 2, it's some specific evidence. So you want to make sure that you are using specific evidence, not mostly general, okay? Mostly general is like kind of like a summary or whatever. You want to have some specific stuff from the text. And then, of course, you have to evaluate the rhetorical function of what's being used. So the 2 says that some relates to the student's argument. 3 is not only the student argument, but on top of that, one choice linked to the writer's argument. And then on top of that, if you want to hit that 4, you're looking at multiple choices that are linked to the writer's argument, okay? And it's not just that they can be linked, it's that you, the way you have written it, you have spelled out exactly what it is, why it's there, how it impacts the audience. So all of those pieces, you're demonstrating the understanding of your rhetorical situation, but also the writer's rhetorical situation. Does that make sense? Okay. So then we talk about the line of reasoning. So the line of reasoning with the key ideas, you want to look at a logical progression of your ideas. And we talked before about this is why I personally recommend the chunked method, because when you are looking at the chunks of the text and you're going through it in the order they happen, you have a logical progression, okay? We also talked about the fact that it was quality and quantity that both matter, but of course that quality is better than the quantity. Now we have referenced the MLA expectation of a 1 and a 2 and an A and a B. So a minimum of a second body paragraph and a minimum of 2 devices in each strategy, or a minimum of 2 evidences in each paragraph, whether you choose the strategy approach or the device approach, okay? But you've got to make sure that they actually support the claim that you have there. They have to relate to it, and they have to have transitions that link those ideas together, okay? And it needs to link all of it so that it advances your purpose. Got it? Okay. So we had a question that popped up here. When it comes to commentary, if I can't get around to a conclusion, will that hurt my commentary score? Or is the commentary score only considering the body paragraphs? Realistically, I don't want to be the person that comes out and says you don't have to have a conclusion, because I think a conclusion is a great place to stamp it in on some sophistication, okay? But sophistication can be present, and should, if you look at the rubric, be present through all parts, the introduction and the body, right? So I think you've got to have at least some level of conclusion, but your commentary isn't necessarily going to come from that conclusion paragraph. It's going to come from those body paragraphs, okay? So great question. All right. So what about the sophistication, right? So the sophistication is when it's not just like a word, and it's not just like a phrase. It's there, and it's there the entire time. Okay. When you see it, you know it's there. So a lot of you guys are saying, what can I do to create better sophistication? Well, if we look at the rubric, it tells us explicitly what we can do. We can look at the significance or the relevance of the writer's rhetorical choices. which you could do theoretically throughout your entire body paragraphs. We can look at the purpose or the function of the passage's complexities or tension. You can mention that throughout. You can put that in your introduction. You can address that in your conclusion. And then here's the last piece, employing a style that is consistently vivid and persuasive. Okay? One thing I like to say to my students here is it needs to sound like it's written by a college kid. Okay, because it's about getting the college credit. So it needs to not sound like a high schooler wrote it. It needs to sound like it was written by someone at the end of their freshman year of college. So that's why that sophistication point is something that so many people think is impossible to get. But is it impossible? I don't think it's entirely impossible. Okay, so now I'm also going to highlight, if you look over here on the examples that don't get it, it does say uses complicated or complex sentences or language that are ineffective because they do not enhance analysis. Okay? Are you there with me? Absolutely. Okay. All right. So some self-check questions for the sophistication point, because I understand you guys want it. If the rubric goes up to 6, I'm with you. I want all 6, right? Yes. So, does your language reflect the rhetorical situation? Are your words general or are they specific? Have you intentionally created some kind of tone in the way that you are presenting your argument? What elements are unique that show your style? Are all of your ideas presented clearly, or are there places where there are logical leaps that must be made? Or are there places where you made a logical leap that created some sort of bias or fallacy? Are there places where the reader has to figure it out alone? Or are there places where you have questions that you left unanswered? Those are all things to think about as you look at how to get that sophistication point. So here's where we are going to look at 3 paragraphs. All 3 paragraphs are looking at the analysis of analogy in this text, okay? So let's look at this one first, okay? Analogy body number 1. So when you look, you can see there are a lot more arrows on the side from what we've got, but throughout the passage, Banneker tries to appeal to ethics, emotional, and logic of Jefferson. Now, we're talking about also like commentary and analysis, and we're talking about sophistication. Notice the way emotional is just kind of thrown in there, okay? Banneker starts off with an allusion to the past in which the early settlers of America were being forced into servitude of the crown. By starting off with this allusion, it causes Jefferson to reflect on times when he felt wronged. Note the way that's just sort of a summary. Okay, yeah, that happened in the text. Moving on. What else happened? Okay. And then it moves down. Another rhetorical strategy that's used throughout the passage is the appeal to authority. Okay. Banneker makes several references throughout the passage to God and the Bible. Again, you've got a little bit of awkward wording there. Make several references to what? Okay, so where would you put that? Don't have the misplaced modifiers, because if you're looking at those key ideas, you want to make sure of where you are. Okay. Moving into that next piece, the reference to the Bible and the righteous man Job is again to insinuate pity for the slaves and to Jefferson to put himself in the shoes of the slaves. So you can kind of see that there's like, it's kind of there, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It doesn't really do anything. It presents this summary idea. It gives very minimal commentary and analysis. And actually, it gives more commentary and not really analysis to it. And then look down here at this cardinal sin. That's why it's in red. We floated a quote. There has to be an introduction to this quote, okay? So it could be something as simple as, because he was one of the founding fathers of the Constitution and wrote, dun, 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 we hold these truths to be self-evident. Something like that, okay? Because right here, what you see is it ends with founding fathers of the Constitution, period, moves into a direct quote, and then goes down to say the strategy was used very well. Does strategy was used very well sound like it was written by a college kid? Nope, doesn't. Okay, so you want to look at another example? Let's look at another example. Banneker then quotes Jefferson's words from the Declaration of Independence and uses these words at and uses these words as a jumping off point for his argument. This appeals to Jefferson's logic side. Notice how it should say something like logical side, as well as sympathetic view, as well as his sympathetic view. He calls it pitiable that Jefferson would counteract the father of mankind's mercies in detaining by fraud and violence. He gives this whole quote. Banneker shows that all men, this is a run-on here, did you catch that? All men which are created equal should include black men as well, as they are mentioned. Little errors, right? Like we can kind of figure it out, but those little errors like that are going to be kind of what stops us. And it's interesting as we've kind of gone through this CRAM, and I know we talked about taking Grammarly off of your computer because you can't take the test with Grammarly on it. I have noticed that you guys are starting to slip a little bit because we rely on it. We all do. I do it too. And so you want to make sure that you're going back and kind of reading it to yourself along the way, just to make sure that you have these little pieces. Note this paragraph does change it a little bit. It gives a little bit of commentary and analysis before it moves into the evidence. It gives a small amount of text evidence in there. But again, it doesn't really go anywhere, does it? Banneker then goes back to respectfully calling Jefferson sir and makes an allusion to the Bible to conclude his thoughts. Okay, very simplex, not great depth of understanding, not great depth of, not a great depth of understanding it, you know, kind of works. So I have one more, but I did have an interesting question pop up that I do want to address because the question was, I removed the extension. Can I still have the application? I'm going to say I would just take it all the way off because you don't want to take any kind of risk with it. And there's not a lot of time. In fact, I have advised my students, and if you guys are reading your emails from us and from Amanda, we are recommending that you submit as soon as possible, and don't wait for that last 5-minute timer. Every student that I have spoken with that has struggled with an uploading situation, it has been someone who has waited until the last 4 or fewer minutes and a Wi-Fi lag or something like that. So I would not wait. Okay. All right. Ready for the next one? You see that quick tip that popped up. Control A selects all, Control C, Control copy, that's copy, and Control V is paste. And that works really well, especially if you're using a Chromebook. I know that sometimes even on a Chromebook, when you try to like right click and copy, it doesn't work at all. It tells you, it's like you need to use Control C. So yeah, it's a great tip to have. Okay. Also, I would do it that way. If I'm being real honest with you, I would definitely do the copy and paste into it. The picture concept, there's so many people who are worried about the time. They'll try to take a picture on their iPhone. The iPhone uses this weird H whatever it is format. That's not what they require. You've got to change your settings before you take the picture. So if you kind of got to go back and figure out that it's not in a file that they want, or I had someone who said that they had emailed the picture to themselves and then they were waiting for the email to come through. And then when it finally came through, they had to download it and then they had to upload it, and it was just doing a lot. So I would definitely go with that copy and paste. Okay, last paragraph. Hopefully what you're going to see here is an increase in that sophistication. Banneker's main argument centers around the analogy of slavery to the oppression of the colonies under the British Crown, which he uses to point out that the newly freed American people should be able to understand the feelings of the slaves. The author implores Jefferson to recall the state of servitude to which you were exposed. Now, here's what I'm going to highlight here. Note the way that it's a small phrase, ellipsis, and then another small phrase. That shows depth of understanding. That shows that this person has chosen wisely the very words that are going to do what they say. And in this case, it doesn't just tell Jefferson to recall. It doesn't just direct him to recall. It implores him to recall this thing. This choice of words allows Banneker to draw the parallel between colonial subservience to slavery that many would fail to make upon first glance. Just as the colonists wanted freedom, Banneker asserts that the slaves wanted it and deserved it as well. Making an appeal to the authority of the Declaration of Independence, written by Jefferson himself, the author reminds Jefferson of the unalienable rights about which he had written not so long ago. In doing so, the author puts his audience in the shoes, or lack thereof, of the slaves to make them understand the oppression and injustice the slaves feel. Do you notice the difference in sophistication there? There's greater depth of thought. The syntactical choices in building this are more intentional. You can see that there is a higher level of sophistication in this paragraph as compared to the other two. Would you agree with me? Okay. So I hope that by looking at 3 separate body paragraphs and comparing the syntactical choices in each of those and comparing the way that they've used either summary or evidence or a combination of paraphrase with evidence and embedded their commentary and analysis, because you got to have analysis there, and linking it back to that bigger picture purpose that Banneker is trying to achieve. So hopefully you guys feel pretty good about it. Would you agree? All right. So for your learning intention tonight, our goal was to put it all together so that you could write a strong response in the given time frame. I wanted to build a little bit more focus on sophistication, and rather than addressing a single paper, I wanted to take the same idea presented by 3 different writers so that you could look at and have a better understanding of commentary and analysis and sophistication in the actual writing samples from you guys. So if you say comparison instead of analogy, will that decrease your sophistication? Not necessarily. Remember, comparison is a mode of development. It's not just, your sophistication is not just about a single word. It's about your word choice, about the way that you've built it to be vivid vocabulary, and the way you've built it to be incredibly persuasive throughout all parts of your essay. So one word here or there, it's not going to hurt your sophistication or help your sophistication. It's got to be through the entire process. Okay? All right. So I did have a couple of resources I wanted to make sure that you had, and I shared them with you last week, but just in case, it looks like we got some people here that weren't here last week. So you have this first one here. If you want to print it out, keep it beside you. It might help you a good bit. You can kind of scroll down. It gives you the step-by-step outline of this process, okay? So if you're not really sure on how you want to build it, you can kind of look through it, go through it, get the steps, get the process, all of those things, right? Okay, but I do have another one that I think might help you just as well. So if you look at this one, what you should see here is, and I'll kind of scroll down for you on this one so you can kind of see, it does have that same kind of outline, but then it gives you a thesis statement frame so you can see an example of a good thesis statement and a great thesis statement. Moving on down, it will go through the device-driven strategy response planning, okay? So just in case your mind goes completely and totally blank, we've got your back for you. So you can look at the what that is being done there. You can look at why it is being done, and you've got some reminders of how it's being done in terms of the impact on the audience movement. Not just how it impacts Jefferson, not just how it's supposed to make him feel, but what is he going to do as a result of feeling this way, okay? I've given you some introduction to the paragraph sentence frames, some sentence frames for explaining the why, and some sentence frames for explaining the how. Also, in that far over there on that left-hand side, it's on the left for me. I hope it's on the left for you. I don't know if I mirrored or not, but it gives you some basics that you can look for. Diction and tone, imagery, details. You can look at the language. You can look at the syntax or the style that's there. You can look at modes of development. You want to try to find those strategies that we've kind of looked at. And again, I'm going to remind you, I believe it was Andrew that pointed out earlier, those strategies, they're going to be the verbs. It's the thing that the author is doing, okay? It's the way the author is doing it. Okay, well, guys, I built in some extra time for some question and answers if you guys have it. I do have a question for you here in just one moment, but I wanted to make sure and kind of share out who I am, what I am, and how you can get in touch with me. I'm at Kirk's Corner on Twitter, so please do follow me. And when you get your scores, give me a little @ on there. Like, tell me what you got. Tell me how you did. And so that said, I'm going to go through and answer all of your questions. But while I answer your questions, just in case, I'm going to leave this open here for you. Our big CRAM is almost here, right? Yeah, I know. I can't believe it's already that time. So the question becomes, what do you want to make sure that we cover in this mega session? Give me any of the concepts, any questions, anything at all, and we will be sure that we address all of your comments, concerns, questions, things that make you cry at night. Put them here because we're going to work together and we're going to boost you up right before the exam. Okay? So I'm going to start answering questions while you guys are working on this. If you have anything at all, I'm going to leave this open for the rest of the night so you can come back to it. But before I start answering these questions, if you are done, you are ready to go. And if that is the case for you, bless you, my child. I love you, and I look forward to seeing you in our CRAM sessions. And then I'm going to answer these questions. So if you want to stay around and join the questions, let's do that. Okay. So let's see. I think I had, is creating vivid imagery considered a device or a strategy? You can say creating vivid imagery as the strategy because it's going to be the specific things that are done. I personally would write that it is the word choice that creates that imagery there for you. Next question. I turned in the prompt today. I believe I saw it. I think I have, let's see. I will pull those up again. It looks like we did get a few more. So if you submitted it today, I will get to it for you so you can kind of look at that and see what that is. Any other questions? We've mastered so much. Can you give us specific feedback for what we did wrong? So typically what I'll do is I will look for the sentences that kind of outline it. And then I tend to, depending on how soon they get turned in, give more feedback to the ones that are a little bit earlier. No shame, no shame. I understand you do what you got to do, but I try to like kind of make sure I can get them back to you as quickly as possible. And sometimes I do get a lot more responses than others. But what I'm trying to do is look at it in terms of your thesis statement and how does that outline your body paragraphs. And then in terms of your body paragraphs, you might see that I add comments on the side, or you might see that I add suggestions in bold in the body paragraphs there. I don't like to think about what we did wrong. I like to think about what we can do to grow. Does that make sense? I don't know. I don't like to think about what we do wrong. We do wrong things, that's true. But if we think about things that we can grow from, instead of thinking about the negatives, I feel like that's a better way of wording it. Okay. I've been very busy with a push. Can I do the prompt tomorrow? I suppose. Of course you can. That's fine. Absolutely. I know that we all have so many things going on all at once, and like AP exams rush week is such a big deal. So I understand. Will we have the chance to do additional prompts and get feedback before the 20th? So like putting another prompt up there right now, I think we have several prompts up there. And I went through and kind of was looking at which ones had some additional submissions. And I think I saw, Andrew, I believe you put one up that was a different one from what was there. That's totally okay. I don't mind. I can definitely go through and look at that. I definitely want to make sure and give you as much feedback as you can, but here's my thing. Are you ready for this? I don't want you like writing essays on the 18th and the 19th and the 20th. I want you to take a break. If you think through those things, that's fine. But don't kill yourself on this, okay? Don't make yourself brain dead, because when you get your essay, I don't want you to be in that mind space. I want you to know that you can do it, okay? And I want you guys to all check your email like, I don't know, an hour or two before the test. Okay. All right. I think I saw another one. Okay. Do you know of any sources to help us learn some more vocabulary? Yes. I can give you some of the Quizlets that we've been sharing in the CRAM. I'm Miss Kirk's class on Quizlet, so you can kind of go on there and find a lot of different ones. I don't have a problem with giving you the sources to learn the vocabulary, but I am going to point this out. AP College Board no longer wants you to remember 500 abstract rhetorical devices, okay? They don't necessarily, the names don't matter. It is what is being done and how it is being done that matters. So if you're looking for vocabulary in terms of the names of devices, I mean, I'd be hesitant to spend too much time with that, especially between now and the 20th. But if you're looking for like rhetorically accurate verbs so that you can better describe what's happening, I think that's a great strategy. And again, you can find that on Quizlet. There are lots of things out there, but I think I am Miss Kirk's class. I think there's a picture of a golden retriever on mine. Let me see if I can put that in that link over there. Does anyone have any other questions though? Anybody? Give it another minute and see, think. It pulls up a couple of different Miss Kirks. Anybody? No more questions? All right. Well, if that said, there are no more questions. Like I said, I'm gonna leave this open on your AirPods so you can do it. I'm gonna go ahead and sign off here. If you chill for just a moment, I will put some links over here in the comment boxes for you so that you'll have those Quizlets that we were talking about just a moment ago. And then anything that you guys need from me, feel free to, you can DM me on Twitter. I'm at Kirk's Corner. You can send me an email, Stephanie@Fiveable.me, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for joining with me tonight. Bless you, my children. I love you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next stream. Have fun.